Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Six Path Weeb, and I'm glad to have you here. Today, we're diving into part 4 of our fanfic series, Naruko Has Ice in Her Veins. Get ready for another exciting installment filled with twists, emotion, and epic moments from the Naruto universe, reimagined with our unique touch. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not own any of the anime footage used in my videos. All rights and credits go to their respective creators and copyright holders. Alright, let's get into it. Naruko quickly found herself standing in the Hokage's office, accompanied by Tenten and Haku. A quiet tension hung in the air, softened only by the muted light filtering through the windows. As the silence stretched, Naruko couldn't help but wonder why the Hokage had called them in. To her left stood Konan and Ibiki, their presence puzzling. Judging by the stern expressions on the adults' faces, the three young kunoichi could only guess what was going on. Tenten kept her eyes ahead, trying to read the Hokage's unreadable expression. The silence soon became difficult to bear. Haku instinctively reached into her pocket, fingertips brushing the edge of her mask, as if ready to wear it for reassurance. Tenten seemed to share the same feeling, her hand slowly moving toward the pocket that held her own. Across from them, the Sandaime Hokage sat composed, fingers interlaced in front of him, although his thoughts were clearly elsewhere. Even after all this time, he still couldn't believe Konan had returned. From the way things appeared, he suspected her return was not mere coincidence. If his suspicions were correct, she had found what she was searching for. He hoped she hadn't realized the truth that stood plainly in front of her. The Hokage shifted uncomfortably beneath the brim of his hat. If he handled the situation wisely, perhaps he could resolve everything without conflict. He gently tapped his pipe against the desk to draw everyone's attention, knowing he needed to be careful with his next words. Ibiki-san, I'm not certain you grasp the uniqueness of this situation and its possible implications, he began slowly, glancing toward Konan. I was expecting a mission report, not. He trailed off as Konan calmly stated her own name, prompting him to finish. Konan. Konan narrowed her eyes slightly but composed herself. If this was the way he wanted to proceed, she would match his tone. For now, she'd act as though they were mere acquaintances. Naruko and her teammates watched carefully, trying to piece together what made the situation so unusual. Is there a specific reason your Genin are present? The Hokage asked, his tone measured as his gaze passed over each of the young shinobi. Ibiki nodded, stepping forward. He looked briefly at Naruko and then at Konan. Konan-san requested their presence. We encountered her during our mission in the Land of Waves. Our team was tasked with safeguarding Tazuna-san and facing two missing nin identified as Zabuza Momochi and Kimimaro. He appears not to have a recorded surname. Haku's hand tightened at her side, a detail that did not escape the Hokage's observant eyes. They're currently being held and questioned by Anko-san and her team, Ibiki continued. The Hokage raised an eyebrow, quietly signaling him to proceed. He was interested in hearing about the mission, and, especially, how Naruko had handled herself, but the mention of Konan had noticeably unsettled him. When our team became separated during the encounter, Konan-san assisted us. The Anbu and I were split from Naruko, Tenten, and Haku, who engaged with Kimimaro and Zabuza directly, Ibiki said. Konan nodded. She then stepped in to add more. I provided assistance after Naruko-chan sustained an injury near her lower right side. There were no lasting effects. I brought her and the others to safety where we waited for the battle to settle, allowing Naruko-chan time to recover. Naruko nodded, trying to recall the incident. Her memories were a blur, flashes of Haku holding a defensive stance against their opponents, then a sudden crash. The rest was indistinct. Was it a weapon? A fragment? She couldn't be sure. Sighing to herself, she gave up trying to remember the details. What mattered was that everyone was safe now. The Hokage gave another nod, his age weighing on him as he exhaled deeply. Rubbing his eyes, he gathered his thoughts before focusing again on Ibiki. Why were Genin placed in direct confrontation with a rank missing nin? He asked, clearly frustrated. That's the reason I sent the Anbu in the first place. He signaled with a soft bird call, and several masked Anbu operatives appeared promptly before him. Hi, Hokage-sama, they said in unison. Tenten bit her lip and briefly glanced at Konan. From what she had overheard back at camp, something didn't add up. Was Konan trying to reveal something about Naruko's origins? But why involve the Hokage instead of going through a medical team first? Unless she already had some kind of confirmation. While Tenten pondered in silence, Haku turned toward Naruko, offering her a warm, reassuring smile. She didn't speak, But the gesture was enough. Naruko, feeling a mix of uncertainty and curiosity, looked toward Konan. She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Something about this woman made her feel like she should speak, yet no thoughts formed. Instead, she looked down, lost in thought. Konan walked over and gently knelt in front of Naruko, offering a soft smile and allowing the girl to see her clearly. Naruko tilted her head slightly, confused but quietly watching her. The Hokage's eyes narrowed once more, his tone becoming firm as he addressed the situation. Konan-san, please step back and allow the Genin their space, he said calmly, though his words carried unmistakable authority. Konan offered a soft smile up at Naruko, not sparing a glance for the Hokage. Her focus was entirely on the young girl before her. She had something important to say, and nothing was going to stop her now. Naruko looked down at her, an unexpected warmth rising in her chest. Something about this woman's presence brought a strange comfort she couldn't explain. They were strangers, yet there was a feeling. A connection. Naruko-chan, do you know who I am? Tenten's eyes widened as her earlier suspicions returned. It seemed the truth was about to be revealed after all. The room fell into tense silence as the Hokage subtly signaled to the Anbu in the corner. Once again, Konan-san, please step away from Naruko-chan or I will have you removed. Naruko turned briefly toward the Hokage, then back to Konan, curiosity and emotion flickering in her eyes. She wanted answers. You are Konan-san? Her voice softened as Konan gently took her hands in hers. Konan's smile deepened, and tears welled up in her eyes. This was the moment she had waited so long for. She quickly wiped her eyes and steadied her voice. I'm your, she began, only to be interrupted as an Anbu appeared behind her, reaching for her cloak. Without hesitation, Konan gracefully responded, sidestepping while gently shifting the Anbu off balance. Then, without confrontation, she turned back and pulled Naruko into a heartfelt embrace. I'm your mother, Naruko-chan. Naruko's eyes widened, her breath catching as she struggled to comprehend what she'd just heard. I'm sorry? She asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Konan nodded, holding her more tightly, sensing the storm of emotions within her daughter. She understood it would be difficult. She understood the weight this revelation carried. I've been searching for you ever since you were born, Konan began gently. Do you remember the Kyuubi's attack on the village? How Minato-kun protected everyone by sealing the creature's energy inside you. Naruko nodded slowly, already familiar with that part of her story. But what came next made her breath pause in her throat. What are you saying? Naruko asked hesitantly. Konan gently stroked her hair, voice trembling but tender. That day, you were the only one who could contain such immense energy. It was the only way to protect the village. I didn't want to let you go. I begged Minato-kun to find another way. I was afraid of the toll it would take on you. Her voice wavered, and tears began falling again. Your heart stopped when the sealing was complete. I tried everything to help you. Every technique I knew. I didn't give up, not for a moment. And then, something incredible happened. Konan leaned back slightly, brushing a few tears away from Naruko's cheeks. The Kyuubi's power, somehow, it kept you alive. Your heart began to beat again. I couldn't explain it, and I still can't. But it saved you. The Hokage's expression shifted in surprise. Even he didn't seem to know this part of the story. Konan looked into Naruko's eyes, voice thick with emotion. I never stopped thinking about you. Every moment we were apart, I felt it. And I never stopped searching. Ibiki, who had been watching silently, no longer held the same cold intensity. Instead, a quiet empathy surfaced in his eyes. Even his sharp instincts couldn't detect any deception in Konan's words. The room remained silent as the weight of Konan's story settled in. Hiruzen, though visibly conflicted, understood this was not the time for judgment. Whatever disagreements or concerns he held, he would let them rest, at least for now. Haku covered her mouth as tears formed in her eyes, watching the moment unfold. She knew how much Naruko had carried alone, and now maybe, just maybe, she would have someone to share the weight with. Do you believe me, my dear? Konan asked, her eyes red from tears. Naruko felt the tremble in Konan's arms. Slowly, she nodded, offering a small, unsure smile. She didn't know what to believe, but in her heart, she wanted to. Despite everything, she wanted to believe the woman before her truly was her mother. She hugged Konan back, awkwardly at first, but sincerely. So many questions filled her mind, but the warmth of this moment gave her something she hadn't known she needed, hope. If it helps, Konan added, The official records of your birth are still here in the village. Minato-kun once said they were stored securely in the Hokage's office. She looked over to Hiruzen, and Naruko followed her gaze, noticing the Hokage's stern expression. Hokage-sama, Konan said respectfully, I would like to request access to Naruko-chan's birth certificate. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes, deep in thought. Naruko felt a chill from his expression. It was a side of him she rarely saw. Still, he gave a small nod, recognizing that this moment mattered more than old decisions or past mistakes. Konan had returned, not with anger or resentment, but with love and the hope of reconciliation. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new for Naruko. Moving toward a picture clinging to the wall, Hiruzen gently removed it and set it aside. Naruko watched attentively, her eyes narrowing slightly as Haku and Tenten stepped to either side of her, giving her and Konan respectful space. From the way Tenten held herself, it was clear she already knew something. Haku's soft smile hinted the same. Naruko continued observing as the elder opened a concealed compartment in the wall, revealing a hidden safe. Hiruzen pressed a subtle mechanism and the safe clicked open. He reached in and pulled out a folder. Naruko could sense it contained something important, likely her birth certificate, along with some kind of proof regarding Konan. Konan gave her a gentle smile before stepping forward and gracefully taking the folder from Hiruzen, who responded with a quiet but firm look. When she opened it and allowed the birth certificate to catch the light, Konan leaned in and examined it. Moments later, her eyes confirmed what she already knew. Haku and Tenten peeked over her shoulder. Haku's eyes caught something specific in the name and leaned closer, lightly tapping Tenten's arm to draw her attention. Tenten's eyes widened. Naruko Namikaze, Haku whispered thoughtfully. She and Tenten exchanged a meaningful look. Konan, having overheard them, spoke in a voice as gentle as a breeze in the tension-filled room. The fourth Hokage was a man named Minato Namikaze, she said. He was your father. Naruko's eyes grew wide in astonishment. Her thoughts spiraled as her legs gave way and she slowly sank to the floor, her posture curling inward as she tried to process everything. It made sense now. All the stories about the fourth, stories of selflessness and strength, lined up with the idea that he would never ask another family to make a sacrifice he wouldn't make himself. She resembled him too. The light blonde hair, the sun-kissed skin, those were unmistakable. The shape of her face, however, was different. Looking at Konan, her mother, Naruko could now tell she had inherited that from her. Staring at the birth certificate again, Naruko felt her mind turning. Naruko Namikaze. Huh. Who would have guessed that her last name wasn't actually Uzumaki? The thought sparked a question. Why is my last name Uzumaki? Naruko asked curiously. Konan's cheeks flushed slightly from embarrassment, but she quickly composed herself and smiled. Well, Naruko-chan, I don't have a family name anymore, but you could say I once did. It was Namikaze, Konan replied warmly. Naruko tilted her head, puzzled. Then why Uzumaki? Don't tell me it was just picked at random. The others in the room chuckled gently. Even the Hokage, despite the tension, tried to soften the mood with a faint smile, though the beads of sweat at his brow betrayed his discomfort. No, it wasn't random, Konan reassured her. The name Uzumaki was chosen to protect you. There were people out there who might have tried to hurt you because of your father's legacy and because of the threats faced by the village. Using a different name helped keep you safe. She trailed off quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Hiruzen's voice cut in, calm but firm. That's not the full story, is it, Konan-san? I won't stop you from telling Naruko the truth, you have that right as her mother, but let's not twist the facts. You know why the name change happened. He had been listening closely, and as soon as Konan began to speak beyond what he was willing to allow without comment, he stepped in. Konan frowned slightly, while Naruko, Haku, and Tenten looked between them in confusion. Ibiki remained in the background, saying nothing but clearly paying close attention. The name change didn't change the purpose, Konan said coolly. Whether she had my name or someone else's, it didn't change what we were trying to do, to keep her safe. I went along with it because I had no other choice. If I could go back and do things differently, I would. But life doesn't give us those chances. Right, Hokage-sama? She stood and gently took Naruko's hand. Naruko's mind was still reeling with everything she'd learned. She squeezed her eyes shut. Before anyone could say anything else, she vanished from the room, Haku and Tenten disappearing right behind her. Konan felt the space where her daughter had been, the warmth of her hand now gone, replaced with nothing but still air and the quiet of a wooden floor. She turned her eyes on the Hokage again, frustration mounting. The day had been filled with emotional challenges. Earlier, she had seen Naruko weeping silently beneath a mask. Now she had to find her again, because of words that had complicated an already delicate situation. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady her heart. Now that the children are gone, Hiruzen said calmly, perhaps you'd explain why you've returned. Considering your past associations, I can't believe your only reason is for Naruko's well-being. Even then, I question your commitment. Konan remained quiet, watching his every expression. Anbu were present. She had to remain composed. Her thoughts wandered briefly to her former allies, people who had warned her that this moment might come. That if she ever reunited with her daughter, she might be met with rejection. With fear. Or worse, separation. And yet, Naruko hadn't rejected her. Not at all. There had been confusion, even sorrow, but also hope, something Konan clung to. Anbu, Hiruzen said, please leave. The masked shinobi exited silently. Once they were gone, Konan's face shifted, hardened by her resolve. Speak, Hiruzen said plainly. Konan watched him with a calm intensity. She drew strength from within and composed her words carefully. I returned because my daughter is alive. I will not let anything keep me from being with her. Is that so? Hiruzen asked. If I remember correctly, that restriction was placed after what happened to your husband. And the harm that came to the village afterward. And, let's not forget, the condition your daughter has carried because of it. Konan's hands tightened, but her voice remained even. No. Naruko's seal has nothing to do with my past affiliations. And you don't deny the other concerns? He asked. I do, Konan answered firmly. There is no evidence to support those claims. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, Minato was the one who sealed the 9 tails within Naruko. I was inside the village, taking care of her, when the incident happened. Her voice remained poised, though a subtle furrow formed between her brows. Then, not long after, I heard people calling for me to be cast out. And even worse, I heard rumors that Naruko was gone. Do you understand how painful that was? The anguish caused by fear and misinformation? Hiruzen met her gaze in silence. Ibiki-san, Hiruzen said after a pause, what do you remember about the day of the 9 tails incident? You were near Konan, if I recall. Did you see her? Ibiki stood silently, posture firm, as he processed the conversation. He had spent the entire time listening intently, carefully piecing together the information. When his Jinan team had left, he had considered following them, but a subtle glance from the Hokage held him in place. So, he leaned against the wall, thoughtful. He didn't know all the details, but his memory rewound to that day. He recalled walking near the Namikaze estate, but no, he didn't remember seeing Konan then. Surely, he would have remembered her. Ibiki shook his head and exhaled slowly. I wasn't even aware Konan-san was married to the 4th Hokage. Wait. Is she really? Hiruzen lowered his eyes and nodded with quiet affirmation. Yes. She and Minato-kun married a year or 2 before the 9 tails incident. Konan nodded, arms crossed, carefully observing. Where was he going with this? What does that have to do with my allies? She asked with raised eyebrows. Minato-kun and I maintained a private relationship to avoid unnecessary attention. My allies offered valuable intelligence to this village, she stated calmly. Hiruzen met her eyes and gave a small nod. Their intel had indeed been beneficial. Because of that, she was welcomed and given protection, but all of that had been called into question when trust was broken. Some believed she had manipulated Minato and used the opportunity to assist in breaching Konoha's defenses. The only thing that didn't quite fit the theory was that she had returned to check on her daughter, unless, Hiruzen considered, she was here for something else entirely. Regarding the information you brought us, we appreciate the short alliance and what we gained from it, Hiruzen said firmly, but this village cannot harbor those considered to have betrayed it. Konan studied the Hokage with a calm expression. His words were final, and yet not unexpected. She had already anticipated this outcome, though she had hoped for something better. Still, hope often proved to be fragile. That's why she had come prepared. From inside her cloak, she retrieved a scroll, her fingers brushing against the edges until it came loose in her grasp. Ibiki and Hiruzen watched closely as she placed the scroll on the Hokage's desk, eyes closed briefly in reflection. It wasn't defeat, if anything, it was a heartfelt effort to remain close to Naruko. With a quiet rustle, she unrolled the scroll and vanished from the room to find her daughter. Ibiki turned toward the Hokage. Hokage-sama, he asked. Should I retrieve Konan-san? There was no answer at first. Hiruzen's eyes remained locked on the scroll, expression shifted to one of surprise. He seemed taken aback. After a long pause, he finally responded. No. Instead, I want you to have your students undergo a skill evaluation. That was one of the conditions outlined in her agreement, and I intend to honor it. Have them meet at your usual training field. If Konan is already with Naruko-chan, Tenten-chan, and Haku-chan, she can observe the assessment. I will join you all shortly. Ibiki nodded, still trying to process the situation. May I ask why? The Hokage let the scroll drop onto his desk and turned to the window, sunlight brushing across his face as he considered the words within the treaty. They changed everything, made his role both simpler and more complicated. Because the terms she set are clear. And I believe it's in everyone's best interest that we uphold them. For now, he replied. Hi, Ibiki responded before departing. Once alone, Hiruzen gazed out toward the horizon. The setting sun reflected his inner thoughts, an odd blend of clarity and reflection. Like the moon, Konan had returned quietly, under uncertain circumstances. Now he waited for the return of Kushina's spirit, embodied in Naruko. As always, the sky balanced the light of the sun and the calm of the moon. If anything, Minato had been that sky, steady, present, and ever protective. He still wondered how he had balanced the presence of both Konan and Kushina in his life. Though bittersweet, the thought now felt almost poetic. Naruko raced through the quieter alleys of Konoha's lower district. Haku and Tenten stayed close behind her, matching her determined pace. Though their expressions were serious, their concern was not for each other, it was for where they were headed. The area they ran through was worn down. The buildings, once vibrant, now looked tired with paint peeling and wood-weathered by time. The narrow streets allowed only slivers of sunlight to filter through, casting shadows that felt more like twilight than evening. Despite its atmosphere, this path was the fastest way to Ichiraku's, and Naruko was set on reaching it quickly. They finally broke into an open street and slowed their pace, blending in among the crowd. Their masks went up as they approached Ichiraku's ramen stand. From inside, the familiar voices of Anko, Ayame, and Tucci could be heard sharing a friendly conversation. The renovations for the new room were a challenge, not to mention pricey, but I'm hoping it'll be ready for our newest guests by the end of the day. Anko smiled with her usual warmth. The trio took seats beside her, prompting Ayame to gasp joyfully. Naruko-chan. Haku-chan. Tenten-chan. You're back. They each offered small smiles, glad to be among friends. Anko leaned in, concern lining her features. How are you all doing, really? Naruko looked at the others, then replied softly, We're okay, Anko-ne. Is something bothering you? Anko's smile faded a bit as she explained, Ibiki told me about the situation in Wave. Though I suspect he left out a few things. He seemed distant. He mentioned Zabuza and Kimimaro. The mood turned somber. Even the cooks paused to listen, concern rising in their expressions. When did it happen? Anko asked. Haku tilted her head. What do you mean? Naruko understood. Just outside the village, she said, voice quiet. Ayame and Tucci exchanged worried looks. There were a couple of opponents working under Zabuza, Naruko continued. They caught us off guard briefly. At least, that's how I remember it. Tenten added, we restrained them and followed the protocols Ibiki-sensei taught us. It wasn't easy. We had to apply tactics we weren't comfortable with. Ayame covered her mouth in quiet shock while Tucci closed his eyes, nodding slowly. Anko took it in and nodded, her voice quieter now. So I'm guessing it was your first real mission under pressure? She asked gently. It's never easy, no matter what people say. Naruko exhaled and tried to smile. Let's change the subject, okay? We did what we had to do. We're not proud, but we're learning. And I'm glad you care, Anko-ne. Anko raised her hand playfully. One miso ramen, please. The chefs smiled and turned to their work, Ayame sneaking a kind pat on Naruko's head as she passed by. It was a moment of peace amid uncertainty. Once the kitchen noise returned, Anko leaned in again, voice low. So, about the woman with blue hair. Ibiki said she might be your mother. Are you okay? Naruko hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes, there was still much to process, but she couldn't deny the truth. Konan knew too much to be a stranger. And you came here to take a moment to breathe, didn't you? Anko asked kindly. Naruko gave a quiet nod. Yeah. Hey, Naruko-chan, I don't know this woman, and I'm not related to you by family, so maybe it's not my place to say anything. But if she really is your mother, I think it might be worth giving her a chance, Anko said gently, glancing over at Haku and Tenten. I'm only saying this because I grew up without parents too. I imagine Haku-chan and Tenten-chan understand what that feels like. Haku gave a quiet nod, while Tenten looked down with a thoughtful frown. No. My parents aren't people I ever wanted to meet, she said quietly, her gaze fixed on the counter. And before you ask, yes, I've seen their records. They're not the kind of people I look up to. Naruko and Haku nodded in understanding. Tenten, like them, had grown up as an orphan. Many people assumed things about her past without really knowing the truth. Like most children, she had once wondered who her parents were. After years of wondering, and sometimes searching with Naruko and Haku, she had finally asked the Hokage for help. To her surprise, he found a file in minutes. At first, she was filled with excitement. But when she opened the file, her excitement quickly faded. The Hokage, usually warm and kind like a grandfather, had seemed quieter than usual. And as she read through the pages, Tenten had left the room with a heavy heart. She never spoke about it again. Only Naruko and Haku knew what was in that file, and since then, they had become the ones she considered true family. She sometimes wondered why the Hokage gave her the file at all. Maybe he believed every child had the right to know. Maybe it was just a chance to find closure. Anko began again, but Naruko gently raised her hand, signaling for her to pause. Why should I accept Konan-san? Naruko asked, her voice soft but steady. Maybe she's my birth mother, that won't change. But I've grown up on my own. Can someone just step in and become a mother after all that time? She looked down, her hands tightening slightly at her sides. It's not that I don't want a mother. I do. I really do. I just don't know if I can accept it so easily. Then, a gentle pair of hands rested on her shoulders. I know this is sudden, Anko said softly. Trust me, I was just as surprised when Ibiki-san told me. But sometimes the truth comes out whether we're ready or not. Maybe Konan-san is your mother. Maybe not. She has blue hair? Sure, you don't. People can look different and still be family. But whether she's your mother or not is something only you can decide. And if she is, who knows? You might just find yourself surrounded by a whole new kind of love and care. And I bet Haku-chan and Tenten-chan will be part of that too. Naruko closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, listening to Anko's voice like a soothing melody. Her heart felt lighter, like she was wrapped in the warmth of a family hug. She glanced to the side at her closest friends, her chosen family. If Konan really was her mother, then she wouldn't be the only one gaining something. Maybe they all would. She smiled faintly at Haku's pink cheeks and playful expression. Perhaps the idea of adoption would take some getting used to. But it wasn't an unwelcome thought. Ka-san. The word echoed in her heart. It felt unfamiliar, but not impossible. Just then, a light breeze drifted in through the door, and a hand gently touched her shoulder again. Naruko turned to find Haku standing closer than before. Her cheeks warmed as Haku leaned in to whisper softly. Whatever happens, whatever we learn. I love you, Naruko-chan. Haku's hand slipped away as she returned to her seat, leaving Naruko smiling quietly. I love you too, she thought. Orders up. 4 miso ramen, on the house. Came the cheerful call from the kitchen, breaking the quiet moment with a sense of comfort and normalcy. Konan moved gracefully over the rooftops of Konoha, her expression calm but thoughtful as she left behind the chaos she had just escaped. Now that she had a moment of peace, her focus shifted to the matter weighing most heavily on her mind. Naruko, the Jinchuriki, was at the center of it all. Konan needed to find a way to safely extract the 9 tails, one that would keep Naruko unharmed. Naruko wasn't part of the Uzumaki clan, so she lacked the same heightened healing capabilities. In many ways, Konan saw herself in Naruko. From the moment Naruko was born, she had faced challenges. Her body had once been delicate, her health uncertain. Yet through effort and perseverance, she had grown strong. Still, Konan doubted Naruko could withstand the current extraction method. It was too dangerous, an option to be discarded entirely. As the moon rose above the horizon, casting its soft glow over the village, Konan moved quietly, a cool breeze tugging at her robes. Her brows furrowed as she considered alternatives. Was it possible to have some form of support in place during the process? Her thoughts spiraled before she shook her head sharply. What was she even thinking? That girl, her daughter, deserved safety and peace, not more suffering. Konan paused, looking down at the cozy ramen stand known as Ichiraku Ramen. Laughter and cheerful voices carried through the air, along with the delicious scent of freshly made noodles. "Minato-kun, what would you have me do?" she whispered to herself. She had believed in Nagato's vision for a better world. A peaceful one. A world where Naruko could live without fear, without division, without conflict. It was a dream worth striving for. But not if it meant risking Naruko's well-being. She couldn't accept a peaceful world where her daughter wasn't beside her. The aroma of ramen stirred her appetite, and the warmth from the lights below contrasted with the night's chill. Konan allowed herself a moment of peace, just listening to the joyful chatter, one of the voices belonging to Naruko herself. She knew she had to find a better way. Perhaps tomorrow, she would join her daughter and think about the plan with a clear heart. For now, a few loose ends still demanded her attention. A presence stirred in her peripheral vision, unwelcome and lingering. "Zetsu, leave. I do not need your help," she said firmly, her eyes steady as she faced the shadows. With that, the presence faded away. Konan let out a quiet sigh. There was much to consider. The Akatsuki's plan had to move forward, but she wouldn't compromise her daughter's future for it. As she leaned quietly against the edge of a rooftop, a flickering light nearby caught her attention. Nagato's response remained uncertain. He was no longer the boy she once knew, and how he would react to her choice was unpredictable. That alone brought concern. Just then, Ibiki appeared and handed her a scroll before silently heading into the ramen stand. Konan opened the scroll and read its contents. A small, heartfelt smile touched her lips as tears welled up. The emotions she had held back now flowed freely as she gently leaned against the wall for support. Her tears shimmered under the moonlight, a reflection of hope and love. Tomorrow, she would be with her daughter. And together, they would find a way forward. The gentle wind swept through the clearing, warming their skin as the sun peeked over the horizon. Quietly preparing, senbon were slid into hidden seams, and kunai were strapped securely at their sides. After stretching with a calm breath, Naruko mirrored Haku and Tenten's motions with care. The scroll from Ibiki had provided only the time and location, no specific instructions beyond simply being ready. So they had arrived early, sharpening their focus and going through a few techniques just in case. While no solid strategy had yet been formed, each of them remained alert, though there was an underlying sense of anticipation, and maybe a bit of impatience. The instructions had said to come early and be prepared, but even after the stated time passed, no one had appeared. By then, Naruko was calmly reading a book, Tenten was writing in her notebook, and Haku was peacefully sketching, amusing a few quiet onlookers. "Hey, Naruko, is this how family usually gets ready for things like this?" someone asked lightheartedly. Naruko looked up with a warm smile at their unexpected guests, giving gentle nudges to Haku and Tenten's shoulders. She closed her book and tucked it into her pouch, leaning back casually against a nearby tree. "And what brings you here, Shikamaru?" she asked with a light smile. "I'm not even sure. It's kind of a hassle," he muttered, glancing behind him, as though expecting someone else. "Kuji wanted to see how you three handled the evaluation, Ino kept insisting I come, and Asuma-sensei just wouldn't stop talking about it." "Oh? And you agreed to all of that?" Naruko chuckled softly. Shikamaru sighed and rubbed his forehead. "I didn't have much of a choice." Naruko laughed gently. Shikamaru had always been the sharpest mind back in the academy, and clearly that hadn't changed. She hadn't expected him to become more energetic, but it was nice to see familiar faces. "Would you mind telling me why you three are being evaluated? Did something happen again, Naruko?" he asked, raising a brow. "No," Naruko replied with a mild pout, arms folded. "Why do you always assume it's me? What about Haku-chan or Tenten-chan? Couldn't they have done something?" "Because you're you," Shikamaru replied in his usual flat tone. "And they're not nearly as complicated as you." Naruko laughed a little, then glanced down at Haku and Tenten, still peacefully engaged with their drawing and writing. She had to admit, Shikamaru wasn't entirely wrong, neither of them usually caused any trouble. Well, maybe Tenten when she was overtired, she thought with amusement. "Would you consider it troublesome that I gave you that mask you're wearing?" Naruko asked playfully. Shikamaru chuckled and shoved his hands in his pockets. "No, that was more of a challenge than anything else." Naruko gave a small laugh and leaned back, her gaze relaxing. "So, how did you find out about this evaluation?" she asked curiously. "Anko-san," Shikamaru replied simply. Naruko raised an eyebrow and tilted her head. "Oh? What did she do?" "She left little surprise packages at our doorsteps last night." A grin crept onto Naruko's lips. She immediately had a feeling what that meant. Did she manage to alert the whole compound? Shikamaru furrowed his brow and glanced toward Haku and Tenten, who were trying to hide their smiles. No. Not the whole compound, he said suspiciously. Why? No reason, Naruko replied innocently. Shikamaru gave her a flat look, then muttered, troublesome blonde. The group settled into a comfortable silence. Naruko resumed reading, while Shikamaru laid back and gazed at the clouds overhead. According to the scroll, they were to be at training ground 7/8. It was now 8:30. Shikamaru had arrived at 8:15, and still, they waited. Eventually, Tenten sensed a shift in chakra and looked up. A group of people was approaching the clearing. She quickly packed away her things and gently nudged Naruko and Haku. Shikamaru was already on his feet. Would it be too hopeful to think they're just here to cheer us on? Tenten asked. Haku smiled softly and shook her head. It's a nice thought. But probably not. Naruko stood up, brushing off her clothes. What concerned her most wasn't the evaluation, but the sheer number of people arriving for it. As the crowd approached, it became clear that Anko had likely left notes or invitations for many of their friends and family. Several wore masks identical to theirs, a symbol clearly meant for this occasion. Mixed among the arriving group were a few Anbu and the Hokage, creating an air of formality. Tenten-chan, Naruko whispered, a teasing glint in her eye, remind me to have a serious talk with Anko-ne later, okay? The group around her chuckled at the comment, and soon, everyone stood together as the clearing filled. Naruko could easily recognize familiar faces in the crowd, Ino, Kuji, Konohamaru, Anko, and Itsuki among them. Leaning back in her seat, a dark figure gazed into the void, her emotionless eyes reflecting the shadows. A quiet smile crept across her face as holograms flickered to life around her, others appearing with similar expressions. Konan. Our window of opportunity is narrowing. The analysis is nearly complete, the figure said, her eyes narrowing. Where are you? Konan, hidden within the hollow of a tree bathed in a soft blue glow, replied with an equally composed tone. I'm currently gathering information on the Kyuubi's vessel, Naruko. The figure nodded, her eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Return once your task is complete. Time is critical. As the hologram faded, Konan exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Nagato was growing suspicious, she could see it in his eyes. Konan knew she had to remain cautious. If Nagato discovered that Naruko was her daughter, her influence might no longer hold. She would need to find a way to keep Zetsu silent, should complications arise. Stepping out of the tree's hollow, Konan soared from the forest of death, thoughts swirling in her mind. Her recent exchanges with Nagato had grown brief and distant. It was difficult to tell what he was truly thinking, his blank expression left no clues. In the world of shinobi, that kind of unreadability was especially risky. A distant sound rumbled through the trees, and Konan immediately knew what was happening. She had been on her way to observe Naruko's performance when the call came in, so she knew she needed to move quickly. She appeared beside Anko, who briefly raised an eyebrow at the unexpected company before turning her attention back to the unfolding test. Konan masked her expression once again, her eyes scanning the shinobi gathered around. In the center of a wide clearing filled with scattered kunai, shuriken, and senbon nestled in tree trunks, Naruko narrowed her eyes and stepped forward. With determination, she launched a punch, causing her opponent to raise his arms in defense as he was pushed back slightly. Naruko offered a small, focused smile. The strike hadn't caused serious impact, but she had gained insight. Standing in formation, Haku and Tenten flanked her. The task was clear, they had to face an Anbu in a full demonstration of their skills. Straightforward in words, but far more complex in execution. Naruko studied the Anbu's movements carefully. She realized their opponent was intentionally holding back, testing them in phases. So far, he had engaged in taijutsu and ninjutsu, but avoided genjutsu, likely having learned from the Hokage that none of the three had specialized in it. Naruko took a steady breath and spoke softly. He favors his right arm when wielding kunai, but seems to lag slightly on his right leg during quick movement. If one of us distracts him, we may be able to catch him from that weaker angle. Haku shook her head gently. That's risky. He's skilled at defending that side, using it to bait us into his stronger responses. If we target his dominant side and create a strong enough distraction, we might succeed. Tenten stayed silent, eyes fixed on the Anbu, studying every shift in posture. Her role was to alert the others of any subtle changes in movement. Nearby, Hiruzen stroked his beard as he watched the team's coordination. He was pleased. Their training under Ibiki had clearly paid off. They showed creativity, intelligence, and teamwork under pressure. Casting a glance at Konan, Hiruzen noticed the composed focus in her gaze. He leaned toward one of his Anbu and gave a quiet command, watching as the shinobi vanished. "Let's see how they adapt," Hiruzen said, glancing once more at Konan. Curious to see her reactions as well. "Hokage-sama?" a voice asked. Turning with a polite smile, Hiruzen was met with the arrival of Danzo, his cane in hand, wrapped in bandages. The Hokage's expression shifted slightly. "Yes, Danzo-san? What is it?" he asked, crossing his arms. "Kimimaro and Zabuza have been questioned. What shall we do next?" Hiruzen considered for a moment. "Have them rested and ready to meet with me once this exercise concludes. I want to hear their information personally. Unless you have the reports with you now?" Danzo nodded and handed over a thick file of documents. Before either could speak further, Naruko shouted as Tenten was suddenly pulled beneath the surface of the field. Danzo raised a brow. "Your test, I presume?" Hiruzen gave a silent nod. Naruko rushed to the spot, grabbing for Tenten's hand as it disappeared. Haku stepped forward protectively, Senbone at the ready. The Anbu tilted his head, pretending confusion, but was soon caught off guard as one of Haku's Senbone struck his shoulder, causing a numbing sensation. Naruko dashed forward like lightning, Haku close behind. Red markings glowed faintly beneath their masks, a chakra seal activating with precision. Still, the Anbu neutralized it swiftly. Naruko's eyes widened. She launched a punch but missed, rolling back to regain balance. Just moments earlier, she had been calmly analyzing strategy. Now, with Tenten seemingly gone, she and Haku were pushing themselves without restraint. Haku launched a flurry of Senbone, then disappeared into the misty field, manipulating the moisture to summon her ice mirrors. Panels of ice surrounded the Anbu, forming a reflective dome. Inside, Naruko unleashed a series of well-practiced attacks, many deflected, some barely grazing through. Outside the dome, Hiruzen raised an eyebrow. Konan's expression was unreadable, but observant. "Where is she?" Naruko called, her fists flying. Mist crept through the battlefield, but Naruko didn't slow down. "I said, where is she?" Haku's focus sharpened, and Konan's frown deepened slightly. From what she had observed, Naruko and Haku were losing their composure without Tenten's grounding presence. Though their friend hadn't been harmed, the shock of her sudden absence was enough to throw them off balance. Dear viewer. And with that, we reach the end of this fanfic series. I hope you enjoyed the journey as much as I did creating it. If you did, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to my channel for more content. Thank you for your support. Best. 6 Path Weeb.